discussing today's topics from an African American perspective. This is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Hamley. Welcome to Another View. Lots of things happening, good and bad, that directly affect the African American community. So let's get started. Let's meet with our Another View roundtable. Roger Chesley is a columnist with the Virginian Pilot, and you can read his columns every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Hey, Roger.
How you doing, Barbara?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
Good. I hear you a little something.
Hoarse voice and all.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Carol Pretlow is a political science professor with Norfolk State University. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Barbara.
Exams all over?
Thank God.
Delcino Miles is owner of the Miles Agency, a niche PR marketing firm. Hey, Delcino, welcome back to the round table.
What's up, my friend?
It's a reference to something we'll talk about later in today's show. Oops. And Wil LaVeist, he's an author, journalist, talk show host. You can hear him every Wednesday at noon on 88.1 WHRO FM, Hampton University Radio.
Always a pleasure, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And, you know, before we get started with our discussions, I do have to say yesterday was the National Day of Prayer for the country, and we had a event at our church last night at First Baptist Berkeley, and I had the honor and pleasure of praying for journalists. So I want you, Roger, and you Will in particular, to know that I had you in my mind as we were.
Roger and that Virginian Pilot absolutely needs prayer.
As we were talking about journalists and national, local, international, and all of the journalists who work very hard to bring us the news every day. So, all righty. Hampton roads in general and Norfolk and Newport News in particular are experiencing a particularly violent crime wave. 33 shootings and 6 homicides in Newport News since January, and 19 homicides in Norfolk. We asked for the number of shootings, but the city didn't give us the chance, that information. The vast majority of shootings and homicides were black-on-black crime and majority African-American men. What are we going to do to stop the violence, Will?
We've talked about this so many times on this show. It's jobs, is multifaceted, but a lot of it comes down very much to if you have employment, if you have a way of taking care of yourself, it is a whole lot less likely that you're going to be out on the street settling scores, peddling dope, and shooting people. If you remember when we were younger and they had things like summer jobs for you for different infusions that went into the community that gave people opportunities to learn a trade, to get some money, to be able to buy the things that they want, the things that they need. You didn't have these kinds of numbers. So where you don't have that, regardless of the community, you're going to have these kinds of numbers. So you start looking at what's happening in some white communities where people are out of work and poverty. That correlation is there. You're going to see the same types of numbers.
Same thing going on. Roger, a different twist to this also that some of this has been police-involved shootings. And in Norfolk, the police chief turned over the investigation to Virginia State Police. And NAACP says this is a great act of transparency.
Yeah, he had been talking and wondering whether that was the right thing to do, if he should try to do that more often. And there is some concern that when the department investigates its own, especially when a homicide takes place, that there's just not going to be the same confidence by the general public that it's going to be an independent investigation. And so we'll see if this is going to be something that the other departments do. Unfortunately, Norfolk seems like a lot of the homicides that take place in police involved in shootings often happen in Norfolk. We've had some in Virginia Beach as well. So that's not a bad step, but piggybacking on some of the things that Will said, you need options. You need to have this sense of African Americans who sometimes I wonder, do we know who we are? I wrote a column about this probably about a month ago where there was a shooting at a metro station in Washington, D.C., and these two young men, one was, I believe, 15, was the victim. The 17-year-old was the shooter. And the 17-year-old seemed to think that the 15-year-old looked at him the wrong way. They didn't know each other. probably only several minutes passed from the time, maybe 5 minutes total. And one of the things that was very striking about the particular case was that the alleged shooter gave his fast food to one of his friends before he ran off. So he seemed like he cared more about the fast food than this young man he just shot. And you just wonder, do we know who we are? Do we know the struggles that we faced in this country over centuries? Do we understand that, yes, we might not always have jobs, but that doesn't mean that you deny a life to somebody else over mostly nonsense. And that's probably the most frustrating thing that I see.
Delcino, when you look at the whole idea of certain neighborhoods and people not seeing anything else other than the violence that they see on a daily basis, and then the snitch factor also that comes into that. Do you think that plays even more of a role of why we're so trigger happy, as opposed to trying to talk it out, work it out,
I think
even fist fight it out? I mean, which we used to do.
Obviously there's anger management issues, but some of it, I agree with Will, some of it's economically based. But then there's another sort of secret in the black community about mental illness. So sometimes that plays into it. And then we're seeing the maturation of the children growing up. So if you're a child, having a child, what parenting skills do you have? And what do you instill into that child if you're immature yourself? I think we're seeing, I'm the product of a teen mom, but she had a lot of family support to raise us. But if you don't have that kind of familial support to teach morals, to have a strong male father figure in your life, you said you were at your church. Church used to be the backbone of the community, and everybody was your parent back then. And so now it's people have this attitude. It's not my problem. That's his son. Or they'll talk about, or they're just dismiss the fact, because it still burns me. I don't know about you all. I think we're all about right in the same generation where you see a kid acting up in the grocery store, you want to do something. But now you got lawsuits, and so you got the public opinion about who was the football player that got. It was Adrian.
Adrian.
Yeah, for spanking his child. He wasn't abusing his child. He was disciplining his child, but he was just raked across the coals. And so, if that's the kind of attitude we have about disciplining children and teaching them morals, then it's no wonder they don't know what to do. Roger, when you said that this kid doesn't know the difference between the value of a life and the value of fast food, who's teaching them?
At one point, and I think that's another area that we've dropped the ball. Education and the schools fulfilled the gap. So we had churches, then we had the schools from elementary on through high school, that if you did something or if there was a problem, the teacher would talk to the parents, look, this is what I've observed. But now when you go to the classrooms, I've been astounded at the classrooms I've visited, and the teachers feel powerless. They feel like, I can't say anything because then I'll get fired. Then, of course, they come to a college or a university, and we have not altered our perspectives. We think that, this is what a university is supposed to be like, forgetting that some of the students don't come from this academic setting. They need help. They need guidance. And so it's a vicious circle.
The NAACP created a hotline because they want people to call in. People have not been reporting any information about these shootings. And the hotline number for them is the Norfolk NAACP, by the way, 757-749-3398 or 757-692-9222. Now, I found that interesting.
Because the police, all the police departments share in the crime line here. 1-888-1888 lock you up.
Right.
I mean, it's almost, you can say it almost in your sleep. You hear it so often. So and you don't have to give your name to that. So I'm wondering if this is really going to get anybody who ordinarily wouldn't respond to the other to the other phone number. We'll see.
I was going to say that I think that people need to understand that a lot of times when these crimes happen, people know who committed the crime. If it's in your community, people know who committed the crime, and people feel if they can't be protected by sharing that they know who committed the crime, And that's one of the reasons why they don't call. Another reason why they don't call is because they figure that this is street justice. And so street justice is going to take care of who committed that crime. And the other thing I'll just like to caution us is to not speak about this as if this is a black community only problem. Because you find this, the reason why it's so prominent here in Hampton Roads is because black people are disproportionately poor to their numbers, or disproportionately uneducated. But where you find communities where you got that combination of poverty, lack of education or undereducation, broken families, lack of jobs, people start feeding on each other. That is sad to say, that is a natural, a predictable outcome that you can expect. So now that begins to beg to differ. Well, if that's a predictable outcome, then what are we doing to change those dynamics? Because we know if you have that condition, regardless of race, that's going to be your outcome.
But, that's a very interesting point that you bring up. And because the question is, if you've been listening to the news a lot lately with the heroin epidemic, now that it has reached middle-class white community, there's a lot of discussion about, the different kinds of drugs to get them off and so forth and so on. But
it's a very,
Go ahead, Roger.
in some ways, it's encouraging, and in other ways, it's disconcerting. If you go back and look at some of the newspaper and broadcast news coverage of crack, say 25, 30 years ago, and contrast that with some of the coverage now of the heroin epidemics, the stereotype then was, okay, this is a black inner city problem. There are crack babies and crack moms. We really don't have to deal with it. And it was one more of shame and disgust, I think, at that time. Compare that to the coverage now, it's much more empathetic. And, several columnists have written about this whole issue, but it is, I'm glad there is that concern about people today, and that, yes, drug addiction is an addiction, and it's a problem, but I wish some of that same empathy had been given 25, 30 years ago.
You know why?
Because
the newsroom reflects white middle-class values. Barbara and I know this. You know this. It reflects white middle-class values. So that's what you see in your newspaper, the white middle-class view of the world. So those of us who come from outside of that and gone to college and seen different things or traveled overseas, be like, wait a minute. Well, hey, there's other things going on. This is not the tone. This is not what the majority of America thinks. And when you start talking like that in the newsroom, what happens, Roger?
You often get ostracized.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're no longer part of the club. And so when you're no longer part of the club, what happens? You don't ascend to become an editor. You don't ascend to become the editor of the editorial page or get a coveted columnist gig because you're not part of the club. And that's what we see. And also that's the disruption that we're seeing going on a political view, is that people are not paying attention to what they say and coming out of the newspaper, that only white middle-class view coming out of the newspaper. Not paying attention to that.
I see you nodding your head, Dulcina.
Oh, with Will?
Yeah.
I don't agree with anything Will says.
Yeah, you better not, because you started off with the wrong foot coming up in here.
Yeah, you'll be all right. Well, I mean, again, I think that the issue, we're going back to family, the very core values. I think most of us grew up around strong families, and we've seen the breakdown of the family. I think that's really the core of what's going on here. These kids, they're finding money for something, Will. They're finding money to buy guns. So no one's giving out free guns. So they're finding money to buy Air Jordans. They're finding money to do what they want to do. They're not doing it working at McDonald's. So I think that there needs to be more collaboration with our families and with law enforcement, and to open up those doors of communication, because there's too much mystery about each side. Law enforcement needs to be more transparent, and the public needs to be more forthcoming. To do that, there needs to be some sense of trust, and there's no trust there right now.
You're blaming the victim. His family's under attack. How are families under attack?
Okay, let her answer.
Families are under attack because families have been disrupted economically.
I'm not blaming the victim. I'm blaming the shooter. The shooter is the one who bought the gun and pulled the trigger.
But you said that's the root of the family. You said that's the breakdown of the family.
It is.
So what broke down the family?
Who knows?
I'm telling you what broke down the family. Part
I'm
of what
not
broke
blaming
down the
white
family.
America for breaking down black families.
I didn't say.
Okay.
That's not what I said.
Okay,
That's
hold
not.
on.
I'm saying what broke down the family. Look at what broke down and starts to break down the family. Roger and I, and all of us, came up in families where one parent was able to make enough income to be able to support the family in many cases.
Right.
Is that even remotely possible in this day and age among working class people?
And even in my family, both my parents were.
And both my parents were too.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So we came up in an era where that was possible.
Yeah.
Is that even
Yeah.
remotely possible now? And then what about some of the policies that happened that took black males out of the family? What
Okay,
about some
well,
of the
let her
policies? Policies
respond.
been on the attack.
What's your
Delsino
question?
respond.
What question do you want me to respond to?
Well, I asked you what broke down the family. I just gave you an example of. You're saying that the families have to fix themselves in part. And I mean, the families
no,
are
not
under
quite.
attack.
Okay,
No,
go ahead,
no.
Delsino.
Families are accountable for themselves, quite frankly. I'm not looking for government to fix anything as far as my family's concerned. I can take my own kid to college. I'm not looking for free college. I can send my own kid to college. And it's up to me to make sure that child has enough of me and my values in them to make the right decisions, not to take a life. I'm not blaming the victim. I'm blaming the person that's perpetrating the crime. And so whether they got a daddy or not, look at the young man who was not African-American who took out his whole family in Chesapeake. So what was the problem there? It's either mental illness, it's either poor family values, or some of these other issues that are going on, external factors, whether it's some people want to blame media, some people want to blame the drug problem. So poverty. Oh, in this case, I think if you look at who's shooting who, I don't think they're all poor, quite frankly. I don't think all the victims are poor. I don't think all the perpetrators are poor. We're just looking at the bottom line number, this many shootings. Who are they really? We haven't taken a look at that.
Let's talk to Ryan in Portsmouth. Hi, Brian. You're on the air.
Hi there. I just wanted to say I agree with the lady. I don't know what her name is, but
her name
I'm
is
a white
Delsino
person,
Miles.
and I can't pretend to know what's going on in the black community. Really, I grew up in Portsmouth. It's kind of a there's kind of more black people there than most other cities, and I grew up in.
Hello. Well, we lost him. He's gone for some reason. I'm so sorry. If he calls back, we'll take him again. At any rate, Carol, I'll let you have the last word on this.
I think all of this is true, but what really impressed me about what you said was the community role. Okay, so I understand that there's a breakdown in families. I understand the economic situation. But then what do? We look to a community. That's where we looked to in the past. So what can the community do now? We've got the NACP, we've got the Urban League, we've got these other organizations, and we've got churches.
And Bill would say, it's up to us. And by the way, Bill,
I think it is up to us, but that's why I like groups like Teens with a Purpose that has been working so hard for so long, and takes people, teenagers, whatever the circumstances, and says, here are some programs that we're going to do. Here's some things you can be involved in, even if it's not poetry. They've got gardens that they work on and other programs, and I think it's so great if we can. Highlight these programs, and I think all of us try to do that as well when we see the opportunity, because there's a lot of groups that are working, and we just don't always know about all the work that they do.
They're doing because they're in the community. Mark joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hi.
Yeah, I just totally agree with Will on this point. I mean, to the extent that, and that's why I'm really having a problem with Hillary Clinton, is that, President Clinton put a few things in place that just exacerbated and just tore down our community. We talk about the welfare reform. That was massive to our community. Did we need to do something? Yes. Do we need to do something? Yes. However, that whole system was on a false premise that you would take someone who was on welfare, invest federal dollars to train them into a minimum wage job. So now they're working at minimum wage with family independence, and they got to find a way to spend parts of their minimum wage funds to take care of their child. So who really benefits in that particular case? Well, somebody like Walmart or some of the other corporate giants that basically pay their employees minimum wage, work them under 30 hours so they don't get benefits, and then the government still has to compensate, maybe not as fully as they would have if they weren't working minimum wage on a minimum wage job, just like home health care, they're getting minimum wage. These jobs that are kind of dead end in many regards. And then add on that, you take the crime bill, which was just like putting an 800-pound gorilla onto the dissipation of the black family even more. So now you have our males that basically now have been just eradicated out of our neighborhood for almost generational type of time. We're talking like 15, 25 years worth of basically just non-existence because they're serving time for a nonviolent offense.
Okay.
Then to add on top of that, when that male gets out of jail, because he had a nonviolent drug offense, he can no longer even apply to get food stamps to get back on his feet. So Will is exactly right.
Preach.
Okay. Mark, I'm going to have to cut you off just because of time, but we get your point, and I'm going to let the roundtable respond to you. Thanks so much for the call. We appreciate it.
And
Go
again,
ahead, Will.
and what he's breaking down, it's not if you're saying that people don't have any personal responsibility. Not saying that at all. Family is absolutely critical. But it's exactly what he just said. When you are under attack by these kinds of policies and how they affect you, you can't now just turn around and say, well, you should pick yourself up by your bootstraps. My goodness, look what he just broke down. I witnessed that growing up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York, growing up in Baltimore. Come on. We saw that happening. And wondering what's going on around us as men are disappearing. And then we have people who let the other policies off the hook by just saying, if the family would just get together, if the churches would just do what the churches should do, we'd be all right. That's letting people off the hook. Be more nuanced.
I'm going to let you have the last word. Then we got to move on to the next topic.
I ain't trusting government to do squat. Next subject.
Okay. Well, with that, if you're just joining us, we're talking about current events with the Another View Roundtable. Roger Chesley with the Virginian Pilots, Carol Pretlow with NSU, Delsina Miles with the Miles Agency, and Wil LaVeist with WHRO FM, Hampton University Radio. And Bill Thomas, by the way, wanted to be with us today, but he is stuck in D.C., and could not get a flight out. So that's
he's such a world traveler.
He's such a world traveler. We miss him. Absolutely. All right. Governor McAuliffe restores voting rights to more than 200,000 ex-felons using executive order to do it, but there are some complications, aren't there, Roger?
There sure are, but and as I wrote earlier this week, I think politics aside, he did the right thing on this. There's some difference of agreement of whether it's legal what he did in issuing the executive order. But every time this issue comes up, you go back to the Constitutional Convention of 1901-02 that enshrined this and basically put people who have been convicted of felonies, at a disadvantage for the rest of their lives. And a lot of these felons are nonviolent felons or cases of fraud or check kiting or bad checks or things of this nature, and have to go through all these steps. And the Republicans, obviously, because they think, and they probably know that a lot of the people who would get their rights back are black, and they usually vote for Democrats. They're concerned about this, but I think of the decades, the more than a century, such people have been disenfranchised, and it's time to end this. We're one of the worst states in the country.
Preach, Roger.
On this.
So and what was the root of why this law is even there?
Oh, it was racism, and it was coming out of Reconstruction and trying to keep blacks from the ballot box in the early 1900s.
But government policies don't matter.
Yeah. So.
Okay. What so?
Go ahead.
What a segue.
No,
what a segue. What's the message that's being sent? Okay, you did a crime. We convicted you properly of the crime. Here's the time
and you finished the sentence.
You finished the sentence. Now you should be able to be restored. Think what the brother just said. You coming back, and I should be able to get a job and enter myself into the community
and become a productive citizen.
No, we don't want that.
I can't tell you how many people I get either calls or emails from after I write about this topic who say, can you help me or get me in contact with the people so that I can get my rights back? I want a chance to become a full member.
I want to do the right thing.
Not everybody is like that, but
right.
Every time I do a column like this, I usually get calls from people saying, hey, I want to I want to do this.
But
I
is
haven't
anybody-
voted before, and I want to get this opportunity to do this.
But because he had to do this through executive order as opposed to being able to get it through the General Assembly, whomever comes into office after him can rescind this, right?
And that's the other thing I just want
Yeah.
to say about the General Assembly. Bless her heart, the late State Senator Yvonne Miller tried year after
She
year
did.
to get a constitutional amendment through and a voter referendum through. And there were always excuses, or it would get through the Senate and it wouldn't get through the House. So the Republicans can't have it both ways. Either you're for this and trying to bring people back into the system, or you just don't care and you want to be linked with racism.
Okay,
Or
Carol?
you're protecting your own political behind so that in the next election you won't be faced with some people who got out and might vote in opposition to you.
Okay. Anything you
I
want to
don't
add,
have a
Justin?
problem with what governor did. I think he should have done it through the General Assembly, quite frankly, too, so the next governor can't come in and undo it. But if these folks have men and women, I'm not assuming they're all men.
Mostly men.
Yeah, it's
Mostly
mostly
men.
men. But whoever, these former offenders have that, and they served their time, they've done everything, they've jumped through the hoops, and they are hoops. That give them a chance to get reintroduced to society and do the right thing and support their families.
Now, Barbara, think about how this message plays out on the street level right now. The message is, I can do my time, the crime, all of that, and still come out and still not be re-entered. Now, look at the person who's on the street level right now on the brink of committing a crime or not committing a crime, frustrated, trying to get a job, thinking about now somebody's approaching them to sling some dope, to make some. What is the message you're sending to that person?
All right. If you're saying if you can't vote, if we keep taking
You're
things
still
away,
not a part of
you're
society.
You're still not going to be a part of society whether you
You're
go in or
damaged
not.
goods.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Yeah.
damaged. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what you going to say? You desperate. You trying to eat right now? Well, I'll take my chance with right now because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
That's very, very true.
So who's benefiting financially from that being set up that way? They'll see
Well,
no.
we know.
Because
Business.
government policies don't matter, right? Government policies don't matter.
Actually,
Who's
this
benefiting?
is a government policy that's coming into play now.
So I guess a lot of people want it this way because they want certain people to be ended up in a prison system and to disappear and
or
to
they
make money
want to
off
help
them
their
and to never
preferred
come
candidate
back.
to get elected. So,
Right, so they can.
Go ahead, Roger.
You know,
hang on
in
one at a
preparing
time.
for the column that I wrote earlier this week, I mean, I went back through a lot of Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and you wonder, you know, how many people, when they do come out and they have to sign that box that says, "Are you a convicted felon?"
Right.
You're basically taking a lot of people out of the workforce that way. And
As a matter of fact, didn't the federal government change that, took the box
I thought
away?
they got rid of that.
That's
box.
one of the
Yeah,
things.
if I'm
that-
not
That's one
mistaken.
of the
yeah,
things
that might be
one of the
the
things
federal
that
government, might not be the
Right.
local and state governments, it might not be private employers.
Right.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
you know, you're making it that much more difficult for those folks to get jobs, and you're also, in a sense, boosting up other folks. You know, making it easier for some folks to get
That's
jobs,
right.
making it tougher for other
Eliminating
folks.
competition.
Right.
Eliminating competition. Speaking of
Industrial
competition,
prison.
Norfolk, Hampton, Chesapeake, and Williamsburg. Sorry, Williamsburg people, from the last time I mentioned this, because I made a mistake and did not mention that Williamsburg had an election. So I apologize. So Norfolk, Hampton, Chesapeake, and Williamsburg all held elections this week. History was made in Norfolk as Mayor-elect Kenny Alexander becomes the first African-American mayor in the city. He downplays this history, stating he's a mayor for all of Norfolk, something most African-American firsts have to do, don't they, Carol?
Yes, they do. And I think that he was being modest. And he, of course, as President Obama said, I am the president of all the people. He is the mayor of all the people. But the reality is that he will be dealing with a number of problems that affect the African-American community. And because of that, and his accessibility, he came to one of my classes not as a campaign, vote for me, but just to explain certain policies of city government a few months ago, and it had a dramatic effect. So I think this is a reason to be hopeful.
Okay. Super Ward 7, Roger, Angela Williams-Graves won again handily.
Right.
She she did not support Kenny Alexander.
No,
she
she
supported
didn't. Andy Protegero, one of the you know, give Alexander credit also in the win. I mean, he got more than 50% in the
Yes.
three-way race, so that's tantamount to a landslide, and it also means he has a strong mandate when he comes into
to be
office.
the mayor for everyone.
But it is going to be interesting. There seems to be a lot of history there from the vice mayor, the current vice mayor, and the soon-to-be mayor. I guess they've known each other for a long time. Her husband and Kenny Alexander, they're both in the funeral home business.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a little bit of tension
in
there.
there.
A little bit.
She was quoted in the pilot as saying, quote, "Put the politics behind us and work together for the best interests of the citizens. Remember, I represent half the city."
Well, he represents the whole city. He represents the whole city. And the important thing is you have an 8-member council. You're going to need at least 5 votes to go forward. It's 8 in Norfolk. It's 8 in Norfolk. And
it's a numbers game.
Right. You want to be able to get, you want to be able to get enough people to back your particular position so you can move forward. We had the consummate politician who preceded Kenny Alexander. We had Paul Frame, who had been there forever.
22 years.
And prior to that was also on the council before he was mayor. So, and he had the power of persuasion, always being involved, always being seemingly everywhere at the same time and knowing what was going on in the city. So, new dynamic, it would be good if the council can work together. We've seen some dysfunctional councils in recent years, Portsmouth. So hopefully this won't be the case.
Well, Andrea McClellan upset Barkley Wynn in Super Ward 6. That was huge also in terms of a change on council. Who wants to react to that or talk about that?
Well, I'll just say this. It's rare when an incumbent who runs for office again loses. You don't see that happen too often on the local city councils here. The power of incumbency, especially in a non-November election when the turnout is usually lower, it is so hard to oust an incumbent. Chesapeake rarely have incumbents been beaten in recent years in either the city council.
As a matter of fact, the mayor was voted right back in. He was unopposed.
He was unopposed, but the three council members in Chesapeake who were running for re-election all won too. Some were close, but they all won.
And the 4 school board members also, I believe, in Chesapeake, they also won too. So our elections are going on. Wait, stay tuned.
But then you also said, did you talk about Hampton? Hampton, you had to say
Hampton, absolutely. We did have an upset.
Was upset. He was an incumbent, long time history, city manager and then mayor, and people said, I think they got George Wallace fatigue. So they put in
Do you think that's
Donnie
the reason?
Tuck.
You think that's why they voted in Donnie Tuck?
That's part of what people have been saying, and then also I think the voter turnout was down. I understand in Norfolk the voter turnout was actually up.
It was about double from the last one.
Yeah.
But how much of that was personality? How much was that in a decision by voters that they wanted a different personality in the mayor's?
I think that was probably some of it. I think it was that and low voter turnout kind of speaks to disinterest. And Donnie Tuck was talking a lot about transparency and doing things differently in the city. And George Wallace, having been the city manager, people know when cities where you don't have a strong mayor model, the city manager pretty much runs, the city. And so he had been running the city for several years. And so,
well, we do know that Steve Corneliuson, who has been fighting feverishly to make sure that the Fort Monroe stays as a national park and so forth, was very much in favor of Donnie Tuck because Donnie spoke of working with that. So it'll be interesting to see how that all turns out. Okay, I want you guys to listen to a clip. Now, this was from our Another View anniversary show that aired on September the 11th, 2015. Let's play the clip.
People are sick and tired of it. And Trump has a great show going on. And let me tell you, he's going to get the nomination. He's going to get it.
Oh, you heard it here first. You heard it here first.
Now, that was Dr. Eric Claville, constitutional law, political science, and history professor at Hampton University. He also does the Claville Report here on Another View. He nailed it.
He did.
And that was in 2015. That was September 11th of 2015. Wow. So
before any primaries or caucuses have been held.
Absolutely. And he was right there on top of it. So what do you guys think about
we were
the
talking
fact
about
that
it on my show this past Wednesday. I had him on. I said, I'm going to give you your props. I had him on. He was being humble but gloating at the same time. But, a lot of it, and again, as I remember that conversation, no one saw this coming, but we were sort of somewhat in agreement in the change or the difference in the electorate that may have been coming, which is what he was arguing, which is that, just like what we saw with the Tea Party movement and what we saw with the Occupy Wall Street, there's this rumbling of people being sick and tired, as he said at the beginning, tired of business as usual and this whole political class, which if you listen to Sarah Palin, which, she's got a point. This whole political class of how things are done and just people being very tired of that and wanting something different and willing to blow the whole system up. And I'm just, it was shocking to all of us that they would turn to Trump. But I get, because Trump is a consummate insider just from the business side. I mean, but he's an insider. That's an outsider. And
because
I think
he's
that's
not
what
a political insider.
That's what people went for.
Well, he's been very good at recreating himself or basically saying things and getting people to believe them. He's outsourced jobs. He uses the system as it is to get whatever he can for his businesses. And I'm not exactly sure why the common everyday individual wants that type of person who has obviously not really had their interests at heart all along.
Donald Trump has exploited the weaknesses in the Republican Party. They haven't appealed to certain folks or folks who are angry, and I'm talking about your hardcore Republicans. We've been neglected, and I'm a moderate Republican, and I just don't feel that they've responded to my needs. They certainly haven't done much in terms of diversity. Not that Donald Trump is doing that, but Donald Trump has touched a nerve with folks who are saying that we're sick of it. We're sick of the politicians. They keep talking. They promise just enough to get reelected, and they still haven't done anything. The gridlock in D.C., we're tired of it. Let's bring somebody in who can do something different. And so anybody but a politician. So when you're down to him and Ted Cruz, who's disliked among his own peers, then it's a no-brainer. Now with Hillary, now we're dealing with two folks that have high numbers of people, unfavorable numbers. So it's the lesser of two evils now. So once Bernie decides, to give up the ghost, then now we can focus on November. And I think that with Donald Trump, he's touched the right nerve, and he's done it in such a non-traditional way where you can offend people and do all kinds of things and still win. And he's won in different states. He just didn't win on the East Coast. He won in the South, and he most likely will win in California and the West.
One of the things that, as a marketing professional, Delsino, they were saying that one of the things that that Donald Trump, Delsino too.
Well, he need to hire a system.
But Donald Trump is the ultimate marketer in the sense that he can turn, like Roger was just saying. I mean, he can take things and turn them in such a way that you don't even know to believe.
That's right.
Carol.
And I think that he does that very effectively because he speaks in non-complicated language. The average politician talks about bill number da 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 and the percentages da 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 da, where he just says, well, no, this is what I'm going to do, and the questions of how, why, to what effect, and to what extent are these policies going to be accepted in the Congress. He's not even dealing with that, and the average person don't want to hear that anyway.
But are you guys concerned about they had the Hispanics were not happy when he was in L.A.? They were fighting in the streets. I mean, what do you think he's going to do in terms of bringing cohesiveness to this country?
I think it's his marketing skill, and I think it's also you seeing the internet disrupting the political process now, because before you had to rely on the media to shape a candidate in a certain way. The candidate shape himself or herself through the media in a certain way. Now Trump is out there tweeting and saying this is what I think. Trump is out there, you catch him on video saying one thing negative to Hispanics. The next day he's saying something different. All that's mattering now is what is he saying now? It doesn't matter that whole history of stuff out there. doesn't matter. He's effectively used the media, the new tools that's available to him, bypass the whole Washington scene and local scene to the point where, guys like Roger are not even relevant anymore in terms of being able to write a column, tell a story, shape a particular perception. And the people are like, look,
he said the right message to the right people at the right time.
I don't care about that.
So
I'm always relevant. I don't know what you're talking about.
To your family.
Okay, could Donald Trump actually pull this off and become president?
Of course, he's going to be one of the major party nominees. So of course he could pull it off. Yeah. Willie is a different question. There obviously are enough Republicans who dislike the fact that he is the nominee.
Well, the chairman of the convention, Mr. Ryan, has come out and said that he's not ready to be 100% behind Trump, but does it matter?
Both Bushes, George H.W. and W. both have said they're not going to endorse him. So, maybe that doesn't mean much, but it will be interesting to see who's actually going to come out to vote.
They do that at their peril because they're going to piss off the voters, and the voters are going to rebel. They're going to rebel.
And they're going to risk losing the Congress.
Yeah, and so you're going to give it to Hillary.
That's what they've got to do.
Okay, let's see what Murray joins us from Newport News. Hi, Murray. You're on the air.
Oh, hi. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not exactly a Trump supporter, but I did want to just point out a kind of an interesting twist that probably is the difference between the Trump supporters and the non-Trump supporters, and that is that the Trump supporters trust him. Okay? And so if you trust him that he's a good guy, to me, in this whole political thing, it kind of comes down to whether you trust the person as a good person so that when they get there, they'll do the right thing. Okay? And that's, to me, it's such a big deal. And not that I know to trust the guy or not, but just as an historical example, it's kind of interesting. FDR hired Joseph Kennedy to control the stock market because he had just gamed it and made millions of dollars on it when it was going down, right, back in the 1929, 30, in the 30s. And, because, Kennedy, maybe he was a good guy. I don't know. You hear all kinds of stories about Joseph Kennedy. But, Trump, conceivably people could be looking at it that way.
Okay.
Yes, he is an inside guy, so he knows how to unrig the rigged game.
Right.
Okay.
It just depends on whether or not you trust him and he's a good guy or a bad guy.
Thank you, Murray, for the call. We appreciate that. Carol, go ahead and react.
I think Murray made an interesting and dramatic point is the trust factor because, okay, he has the trust, then you look on the other side of the equation, and Hillary, the people who are ambivalent about her are ambivalent because they say, we don't trust her. So it's going to come back down to who do you trust?
Yeah, he makes a good point because the electorate is saying we know that those guys that have been in there are not trustworthy. We know that. So this guy over here, he might be. He's an insider. He's been playing again.
Well, it's
like
proven.
he said,
it's proven
maybe he
because
will.
they're not getting anything done
Maybe
in Congress.
He will. Right.
So they have a track record to go by. Donald Trump doesn't have a political track record.
Well, guess who just joins us? Dr. Eric LaVille. Hello, Eric. You're
Hi,
on the air.
You know he got to get his flowers.
Hello, Barbara. Hello, round table.
Hello. Let's all bow.
Well, listen, everybody has their day, and that was just my little small time in the spotlight, but it's not over. What I wanted to do is
time in the spotlight or what? No, go ahead, Eric. I'm teasing.
What I wanted to do is expound upon the question, can Trump win? I believe, now listen to me, I really believe that at this point, the race is neck and neck. Okay, if you look at Hillary Clinton, she is not winning her voters by a landslide. The DNC has the same problem as the RNC. Their voters feel disenfranchised, and they're showing up saying this in droves by voting for Bernie Sanders. Secondly, I believe that Trump, and like everyone else at the round table stated, that he is a marketer. He's a showman. He could spin the message. Remember, he wrote the book, The Art of Making the Deal. And finally, I believe that America is engaging. Well, we're starting to see the backlash of what we call, and this is deep-seated racism I'm talking about now. We're starting to see the backlash of African American ascending to the highest office there's going to be a backlash from that, and they're going to wake up the sleeping giant, which are disenfranchised white males and the poorly educated that feel that America has left them behind. So right now, it is neck and neck.
Okay, who wants to react?
Hey, that's Trump's motto. We're going to make America great again, and that's how that group that he's talking about. That's how they are registering that.
Go ahead, Roger.
I'm not yet convinced that you won't get the number of independents to come out to the polls and the number of Democrats to come out to the polls, that won't be enough to get Hillary over. The question is, what's going to be the amounts? Because if you have disaffected Republicans who don't like Trump and think this man should be, the traits that he's shown, his reaction to slights or to being questioned about certain topics, a lot of individuals think, is that the guy we really want to be in the head of the military, be in the head of foreign policy? Is that something that we really want? Where's the stability that you would want?
Well, the X factor
in the president?
I think, Roger, the X factor is going to be who he chooses as his running mate. So if he has somebody who can perhaps neutralize some of that doubt, with somebody that is liked, that may help.
Yeah, but people vote for the president. They don't really vote for the ticket. They vote for the president.
No, but if we have someone that is liked, like a Rubio, that they feel that it's just a heartbeat away from the presidency, I think that will help neutralize and bring in some of his support.
I think that only hurt. I think that person only hurts you. I think Sarah Palin only hurt.
She was a weak candidate. She was a weak candidate.
The earlier caller mentioning Kennedy, you mentioned Joe Kennedy, but his son JFK,
right.
Pulled in LBJ because he wanted to get the South, and that helped him.
It doesn't seem that has really had the same effect since 1960s, 1970s.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes left. I want to get to this last.
Speaking of president.
Exactly.
What a segue. Bob, you just on it today. You just transitions.
President Obama made his last appearance as president at the White House Correspondents' Dinner last weekend. He was funny and charming and even dropped the mic. But then comedian Larry Wilmore came to the mic, and the laughter came to a screeching halt. And at the end, he called the president the N-word, albeit ending in an A as opposed to an ER. Not sure that it matters. But I was watching that whole dinner, and when Larry got up to do his bit, I ached for him because he was so bad. So I never got to.
He wasn't funny.
I never got to the N-word because I had to go. I had to turn the channel. So I'm just curious as to what you all think about that. Did he take that too far?
Yeah.
I loved it.
I think there are certain things that you can say in certain formats. This wasn't one of them. We've had discussions about this slur. I'm not for it. I'm not for it that all the rappers and other folks that use it, I don't think that they know history or they have a very shallow appreciation for history. I don't like it, and I think that this was totally inappropriate. And I like Larry Wilmore as a comic. I think he's I liked him when he was on The Daily Show, but this was just wrong, and I wonder if he's having second thoughts. I saw the Q&A he did with the Washington Post later on, but it was just inappropriate.
Carol, you had a different take, Carol.
Well, I felt bad for him because as you do, I understood the jokes. I thought they were personally funny, but I think that everything is context. And so in a certain situation and in a certain cycle with certain people there, that those jokes were not going to go over. And part of the role of a comic is a show person. And you watch the audience and all. The last comment, again, that word does not bother me. Words don't affect me that much. But I did think it was inappropriate. Now, if it had been in a private setting, he and the president joking, their families, yeah. But in that context, no.
Delsina?
Ditto. I think that, one, he wasn't funny. That was obvious, and I've seen the event in the past, and they've had some pretty good folks up there, but his jokes just weren't on. I don't know if it was a timing issue, the writing, or what have you. He still defends it, but when the Obama dropped the mic, well, that was kind of a hood move. It wasn't what you call presidential, so that kind of opened it up to say. I understood what he meant by the gesture, but that wasn't the audience to do it in front. As Roger was saying, Roger doesn't like the word at all. But there is time if you're at in a private setting, but not in front of the world to see, and you're using this term to address the president of the United States.
He's the first black president of the country.
So you don't want to use that because I understand that brothers do that, because it's kind of a code thing, but that wasn't the context to do it in front of that audience. It's sort of like sharing a piece of our culture with folks that are not going to understand that culture out of context.
You get the last word, Will.
Right. I get the last word?
You get the last word. You got a minute and a half to do it.
I push back. I kind of side with Carol. I didn't think that he was that bad. I think that his presentation, he was playing to that room, and he was also playing to the camera, a broader audience.
Yeah.
And his kind of dry humor doesn't come across that well maybe in video. And in that room of journalists, he was going in on the journalists, so they wasn't feeling what he was saying anyway. But I defend his right to. I don't use the word in that context other than in endearment and in private. But as a comic, I like what he attempted to do, and I would encourage him not to back off of what he tried to do, because that's what comics do. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to make us uncomfortable. It's a whole tradition for that. We need them in society. And I'm cautious of some of the people who don't like what he did, that they're more worried about what white folks think and the white gaze of looking in on a black conversation. He was trying to flip that. He was really trying to flip that, and his execution was off. But I think that what he attempted to do, I support what he attempted to do as a comic.
There are times, places, settings, and I think on those standards,
It was a miserable
That's the
fail.
white gaze.
It was a
That's
fail.
the white gaze.
Anyway,
don't let white people see that.
I'm often
He was
called
trying
white.
to turn
People
it.
often call me white all the time, Will.
They do?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay,
And next
now
week,
I
the
know.
paperback test.
Oh, my goodness gracious. You know what, Roundtable, thank you so much for being here. We are not going to do the transition music. I'm just going to go on and close the show. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have you had a chance to download the WHRO Media app yet? It's the perfect way to listen to another view live or catch the podcast. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Hamley. You guys are awful. Next week, a topic that we all need to pay attention to, seriously, bullying and how and why it happens and how to stop it. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Carla Johnson answered our phones. I'm Barbara Hamley. Make it a wonderful weekend. Happy Mother's Day, everyone, for all the moms out there. And let's get together again next Friday at noon for another view.